Welcome to NHL Quick Hits. I'm David Crosby here with Steele Roden, and we're back with another first round series preview. Check out our social media or YouTube channel for the rest of our playoff previews after this episode. But this preview is a very unique matchup thanks to the new division alignment this year. This is the only series that pits a team from the Eastern Conference against a Western Conference opponent. Of course, that's the Carolina Hurricanes and Nashville Predators. First off, kudos to you, Steele. When we did our division winner picks at the start of the year, you might be the only person outside of Carolina to have picked the Hurricanes to win it. So let's start with those Central Division winners. What makes this team so dangerous?
Well, without a doubt, it has to be their goaltending. Yes, they have some key forwards up front: Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, Jordan Stahl, especially as captain, brings some big leadership qualities. And then again on their blue line, Dougie Hamilton being another Norris candidate, it's just been lights out for the Hurricanes this year. But it's that love triangle in the crease. It is just a beautiful thing to watch. Alex Nedeljkovic, Peter Mrazek, James Reimer, they've all just been exceptional this year. I know Peter Mrazek's been hurt for most of the season, only playing in about 10 games. He was 6-2-3 on the season with a 2.06 goals against average, 3 shutouts as well. So Peter Mrazek only playing 11 games. Obviously, we would have liked to see him get a lot more reps in there, but you can't really do much when you have injuries. James Reimer, though, 15-5-2, a 2.66 goals against average. Alex Nedeljkovic, 15-5-3, a 1.90 goals against average, 3 shutouts, and a .932 save percentage. So all 3 of those goalies were exceptional this year. James Reimer being the third one, especially even though he stepped up big time when Peter Mrazek's absence, and especially Nedeljkovic as well. So those 3 goaltenders are the biggest key difference in this matchup, and they've been lights out all regular season. I can see it continuing against the Nashville Predators in the first round.
Yeah, Nedeljkovic has been a revelation. I'm not sure there's a better 3-man goalie rotation in the entire league than Carolina. And these guys aren't really talked about all that much. I think it's just because all 3 of them are really good. It's probably the team that gets more credit for being defensively sound rather than looking at those impressive goalie statistics. But to me, it's the special teams that could cause Nashville the most trouble here. You rarely see this, but Carolina has a top 2 power play and top 3 penalty kill. That's amazing. Nashville is amazingly bad in those areas. 24th ranked power play and the 3rd worst penalty kill. Now, I don't want to write the Predators off completely, though. I made that mistake already this season, and then they stormed back to grab a playoff spot. In the first half of this season, Nashville was 11-16-1, and they looked dead. They caught fire and went 27-1 in the second half of the season. So, Steele, which is the real Predators? The struggling bunch we saw to start the year, or the absolute wagon that finished it?
I think the team that we saw at the beginning of the year, and quite frankly, I think the Nashville Predators got extremely lucky to land in the postseason and secure that 4th place spot. At the beginning of the season, the Dallas Stars struggled with COVID protocols. They were out for the first 20 days of the season, dealing with those protocols with 19 of their players, staff member, coaches. So it was difficult for them to get off to a good start at the beginning of the season. And then over to the Chicago Blackhawks. I thought they had the best chance to land that secure that 4th spot in the Central Division. But I mentioned this before. We talked about this when we were on our other podcast. You guys were all hyped up about Kevin Lankin, and I still wasn't quite sure if he could continue on that pace in the regular to finish off the second half of the season. And then having Malcolm Subban and Colin Dealey as your backups, that's exactly what happened. All 3 of those guys dwindled down, especially Kevin Lankin, and they just fell down in the standings. So I think if they figured out their goaltending situation, they had a big hole to fill when Corey Crawford left and then eventually retired this season. So it was unfortunate for the Blackhawks what happened. The Dallas Stars had a lot of injuries to deal with. Tyler Seguin was out the whole entire year. Alexander Radulov was out the entire year. Ben Bishop was out the entire year. Rupe Hintz only played about 40 games this season. So I think the Nashville Predators got extremely lucky. And I think it's going to be a dog show in the first round for the Nashville Predators against this elite Carolina Hurricanes team.
I mean, I do want to give the Predators a little bit of credit because I do feel like their defense is absolutely fantastic, and they struggle with a lot of injuries and absences of their own. Some of their bigger name players missed a lot of time in the second half of that season, and they just kept right on rolling. Whoever plugged into that lineup kind of got the job done there. And I think UC Saros could potentially steal a couple games in the series, but I think you're right. Carolina is the huge favorite here, and deservedly so. Now, some people might think this series is short on star power, but to me, there's no shortage of talent here. Plenty of really talented young players on both of these teams. Who is the most underappreciated player on each team right now?
Well, for me on the Nashville Predators, it has to be Ryan Ellis. He has 18 points on the season. I think he's a shutdown defenseman. We saw his name get tossed around a lot prior to the trade deadline, and he would have got a significant players, prospects, picks back in return for a guy like Ryan Ellis. So I think tossing his name around, I think Nashville would have been a lot better if they did deal him at the deadline. But I think he's a guy that can be a little bit of a force come in this first round. And then over to the Carolina Hurricanes. For me, it's Teuvo Teravainen, and I feel extremely bad for him in the season that he's had so far. He's only played 21 games. He was on the COVID protocol list for a little bit. Then he had to deal with concussions and other minor injuries. So he only was able to play 21 games. But in those 21 games, 5 goals, 10 assists for 15 points on the season. So I think he can really step up in the playoffs. He was starting to heat up a little bit towards the end of the season. So Teuvo Teravainen for me. But another thing that I just want to mention on is that the Nashville Predators are 21st in goals for, while the Carolina Hurricanes are one of the best teams in goals against average. And the thing that I was looking at was their leader for point scorer this season for the Nashville Predators is Roman Josi at 33 points. When you have a defenseman as your leading point getter, even though, don't get me wrong, 33 points for Roman Josi, stellar season, a great season for him on the defensive end as well. But when you have a defense leading your team in points, it says a lot about your team. And being 21st in goals for, going up against this team where we just mentioned Peter Mrazek, James Reimer, and Alex Nedeljkovic, triangle in the crease and just being able to stop the puck as much as they can, it's going to be tough for the Nashville Predators. And that's why I'm not too fond of them going into this first round.
Yeah, you're right. It is definitely a committee approach there on offense for the Predators. I do think it's worth mentioning that Philip Forsberg did miss quite a bit of time there to end the season with an injury. I do think he is a really great player on the offensive end. And I think he has enough to be your number one guy on offense. But it seems to me like Carolina might have 2 or even 3 of those guys. I think Dougie Hamilton's offense is almost close to a wash with Roman Josi. And then we haven't even mentioned Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov. Those guys are 2 stellar young players that I think are really going to open some eyes in these playoffs. But let's finish off with a prediction. How do you think this series plays out?
I think this might be the only sweep in the first round, and it's the Hurricanes getting the sweep, of course, over the Nashville Predators. I just think they're dominating in all categories of the ice: forwards, defense, and goaltending. I am a big fan of UC Saros, but just because of the way he started this year, obviously I'm glad that he finished strong. But you're going up against the top team in your division, a top team in the entire league for that matter. So I just don't think they're going to win a game, and I think the Hurricanes sweep this round one.
I promise, folks, we do not talk about these predictions ahead of time. So one of these series at some point in these playoffs, we are going to have a different pick, but I'm going to have to go with the Hurricanes as well. I'm going to give the Predators one game. I think Saros and Forsberg and Josi, they're good enough to steal at least one game from this Hurricanes team. But you're right. I think Carolina rolls through this first round and on to the next. But that's all the time we have for today's episode. Tune in for more playoff previews this week. On behalf of Steel Road, and I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.